Hi there. Welcome to Creation Station Monthly. This is our monthly show where we find some interesting guest story to talk about a topic that they're passionate about. This month, we are, as tradition for June, leading up for our 4th of July weekend, we always do something on civic engagement. This year, we are doing government reporting, and we have one of the local superstars of you are, Josh. You seriously are. You've homegrown, working your way up and doing all this. You're amazing.
Thank
Joshua
you. Thank
Ceballos,
you.
how
I
are you
appreciate
doing
that.
today?
I'm good, Bob. It's good to speak with you. Um, it's another hot day over here, so I'm working from inside, trying to
Oh,
keep the lights low.
yeah. No. Thank you for doing this, and thank you very much for carving out time to do this. As regular listeners know, we usually have 2, sometimes 3 people on the show. When you have a topic like government reporting, your people tend to get called away at oddball times sometimes. So Josh and I are going to make this work for us, and we're going to have a fun show with this. Josh, tell everybody first how you got your start and what you've been doing in this, because you were like a teenager. It felt like starting off doing your reporting gigs like this.
Yeah. I'm born and raised in South Florida in Miami-Dade County, and I went to Florida International University for college. Initially, I went to school thinking that I was going to be an attorney, and then quickly decided that that was a bad idea for me. And so I was looking for other things that I could do with my English degree, and one of the options was to journalism and some tests that I took. And so I thought that might be interesting. I liked writing. I started working for the school paper at FIU, which at one point was called The Beacon and is now called Panther Now. It's all FIU student media. And that's basically how I got my start. I never took a journalism class. I was fully taught by my colleagues at the school paper, by my contemporaries. And from then, I leveraged that into an internship at Miami New Times, a full-time job reporting for the Miami New Times, and now
For
I'm
those who
working.
are not from the area, Miami New Times is the alternative paper, would you call it, down here to
Yeah,
the
so
Herald?
it's an alternative. What's the exact word? An alt weekly is what we call it, an
Okay.
alternative weekly publication. And I would do a lot of like government and police accountability stories. And now I'm working for WLRN News, which is the NPR station affiliate for South Florida. And I am the local government accountability reporter and a member of the investigations team. And that's been 2.5 years now.
Hear that, people? South Florida government investigations. Do you think Josh has slept in 2 years?
Not much.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing here. So with that, what made you start over there with the paper at FIU and say, hey, you know what? This is feeling good to me versus so many of the things you could have done with your English degree?
I think it kind of tapped into my talents and things that I enjoyed doing since I was a kid, which was mainly writing. It was something I knew. Uh, I knew that this was something that I enjoyed doing. Essays was never a problem for me in school, writing all kinds of things, and so it came naturally to me. But on top of that, I enjoyed meeting new people all the time. Um, I think I get bored pretty easily, especially if I'm sitting at a desk doing the same sort of tasks every day. But with journalism, every single day I'm meeting a new person and learning a new story, learning their story, learning what they do for a living, and that was so special to me to be able to do that and also to inform the public and give them things that they needed to know. I felt like it was very mission driven, and that's really important to me because I don't really see myself as someone who can go into an office every day to sell stuff. I'd rather do like a mission based job.
Yeah. I, I feel that in my heart too.
Yeah.
Anybody who knows me will be amazed if I sit long enough to do these shows sometimes. So when you were doing the stuff at the school paper, was it government oriented, or were you doing more? What kind of pieces were you covering to get your teeth cut, so to speak?
Yeah, so actually, I started working it's a funny story because when I came in and I spoke with the editor in chief, and I was like, I'll write anything, I'll do anything. I just want to work for you guys. And she said, "Will you write about sports?" And I said, not sports. I'm not a sports guy, unfortunately. But I started writing entertainment pieces, so that was like student life, events that different clubs and organizations were putting on, things about the nature preserve and things like that. But then fairly quickly I moved over to the news side, and when working in the news section, I covered the Student Government Association at FIU a lot. I covered the administration, and I found myself often that there's a building in FIU where that houses the school administration, and I would spend a bunch of my time there speaking to the Ken Jessel, who at the time was the CFO and was most recently the interim president at FIU, and just speaking with him about different projects that the school had going on. One of them being the bridge project.
I was just going to ask you about
That
it.
was
You were there for the bridge collapse.
Yeah, I had family calling me. I think it was spring break when it happened. Family called me to see what was happening. But yeah, I was there to cover that, and I interviewed the parents of a student who passed away, and I interviewed the CFO who was very gung ho for this project, and then had this all kind of fall apart. So that my
For our
career at
listeners,
FIU
because we
sort
have
of
people
started.
from all around the world who listen to the show. So FIU, Florida International University, one
Yeah,
of the large universities, very well respected university down here. Was it 4 years ago now? How many years has it been since the bridge?
I'm not sure. I
I
can check that out actually.
want to guess. Yeah. A large pedestrian bridge that crosses over one
In
of the major
2018.
thoroughfares.
So
2018?
yeah.
7. Okay. So 7 years ago. Wow. And the entire bridge collapsed and landed on cars that were driving underneath. People were walking on the bridge. It was a major story here for several days. And then the months of the investigations about how did this happen and all those things. Were you involved in covering those kinds of things?
Yeah, absolutely. So it started with the immediate reactions. Like I found some of the fraternity sisters who knew the student who unfortunately passed away in the collapse, and I spoke with them. I spoke with her parents, and in the months afterwards, I was watching videos and press conferences from the National Transportation Safety Board that was investigating this, and it's really surreal, and honestly, I feel so blessed that at the time, like you said, I was a teenager. I was like 19 or 20, still a student, not a professional journalist, but I was watching these federal press conferences and videos and reading federal documents and court documents, and writing these as if I was because I was a real news reporter.
You were,
You
yeah.
know, student journalists are journalists. And so being able to do that was really where I cut my teeth, like you said, on government reporting, and it all really translates.
How did the paper down there treat, because I remember following it and seeing a lot of the controversy about the construction before and the follow-up and all those things. Was that all something that when you're doing government reporting like that, obviously it's not just one person. Tell me about how does that work as a team when you've got an immediate thing that you just have to scramble and cover?
So yeah, I mean, when a big event like this happens, you definitely have to coordinate, and that's usually the job of the editors, and I give all praise to all the editors I've had in my life. I think at the time that I was working at FIU when this collapse happened, my editor was Michelle Marchant, who now works for the Miami Herald. So shout out to Michelle. But that's coordinating who do we need to talk to, where do we need to go, who needs to do what. So that involves a photographer usually, and if you have one on staff, or being able to get with a photographer to go out and take these photos. Otherwise, reporters are taking the photos by themselves, which can happen. It's also splitting up people to go live and get reactions in the moment, because that's important to get reactions from the students, from the people, from the workers, but also have someone working on calling the administration, calling the engineering company. So there's a lot of jobs, and I think it depends on the size of the newsroom. As you may know, as your listeners may know, newsrooms are shrinking throughout the country. And the Miami Herald, which was once a several hundred member team, is much smaller. As an example, the jobs that you used to be able to split up among many people now kind of fall to one person. So a lot of the times, one reporter is doing all these things, getting reactions, calling administrators, and getting all this together, getting photos. So that can be difficult, but it's a skill we learn to do. But in instances when we do have time, it is a team effort, splitting up. You call this person, you call this person, you go down live, you take photos, type thing.
So now that's been 7 years ago.
Yeah.
What's the difference that you've seen over time of, regardless of who's in administration, regardless of who's the actual political party in, but what's the difference in access versus, and like you said, with limited resources and being able to cover a story then versus now?
Yeah, I mean, definitely now I'm doing stories that are a little bit more in depth and require more records requests, for instance. And something that I've found is many agencies, local, and at the higher you go, it gets worse. But
Yeah.
when you do it, yeah, when you do a records request, they can take so long to get back to you on requests that are fairly simple to retrieve. And I would think, I'm requesting those a lot at the local level, and those can take a few weeks, but sometimes they can take months. If you're requesting from the state, it's going to take months. If you're requesting from the federal government, my reporting partner, Danny Rivero, has something that he requested like 2, 3, 4 years ago, and he still hasn't received any kind of update. So I would say that
I
regardless
work
of
with
the
some researchers who say the FOIA request system is just so broken, and it's not an individual administration. It's just so many people want so much information, and they don't have the staff and funding to give out the stuff.
It's a systemic issue for sure, and
Yeah.
and all respect to all public records custodians that are working on this, because I know that they work hard, and sometimes there's just, like you said, it's a flood of information, flood of requests, and you can't get to it. So that's the main thing in terms of access. I haven't had any issues lately in regards to accessing most people on the local level. I think I'm buoyed by the fact that I work for WLRN, which is a very respected organization. And when people hear that I'm from WLRN, they're like, okay, yes, I'd love to speak with you. At New Times, it wasn't always the case. There were definitely people that were like, oh, you work for New Times, I have no interest in talking to you. Although I will say, I think when you get to the state level, it's pretty hard to get a comment from some of the people in charge on important, pertinent questions. They just might not respond to you at all. So that's definitely the case sometimes.
So what's the difference for you from doing print, like you started off, and now doing radio? And I'm guessing, as you said, you've got a limited number of people, so you're writing the same copy to go on the LRN website as you're doing your audio reporting.
Mm-hmm.
What's that difference like for you to compose for audio instead of composing for the written word?
So I can tell you, when I first started this job, within my first 2 months, I thought, what have I gotten myself into? I had no idea all the things I'd have to learn going from print to radio, when it comes to all the equipment I have to carry, all of the recordings that I have to do. We use an audio editing software, and learning to do that. It seemed like a lot of steps to me, and I felt a little over in my head. Now, 2.5 years later, I'm happy to say I got it. It's not that hard. Anybody can do it. But
no, not anybody can do. I appreciate that enthusiasm, sir. However,
I
not
think
everybody
if I can do it, it's idiot proof, I think. Yeah. So
I'm just counting here 9 lead stories just in June for you.
we write a lot.
Yeah.
We definitely have to do a lot. Like you said, we have to do both. There are times where we might write a radio script, and someone else might be able to write the digital. We have a great digital team that works to kind of streamline and move our stuff. But if we're working on a bigger story, we're writing copy for the radio, and then we're also writing copy for the website. That is different, and you have to kind of stretch a different muscle in your brain, because things that make sense when you're reading it in front of you don't make sense when you're hearing it. And so we're taught to write more conversationally for the radio. So the question my editors often ask me is like, how would you explain this to your friend? If you're telling this story to a friend, how would you say it? You wouldn't say, on this morning, the mayor I don't know how to
Yeah.
say it exactly on
Oh,
the air,
no,
but
no, no. I get
you're
to no,
avoiding
I get
like
the meaning. My phrasing when I'm talking about technology is explain this to your grandmother.
exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
you're avoiding jargon, you're avoiding very like flowery language. You're like this, you're just explaining very plainly this is what's happening, and you have to realize also that when people are listening to this maybe on the radio on their drive home, they're only catching a snippet of it, and if they miss something, an important detail on name, they can't go scroll back up and read it. So you
Yeah.
have to repeat certain things. So at the top and bottom of a script, I might repeat the name of a place I'm talking about, the name of a person I'm talking about. Whereas in print, I would never do that because that's something you can just go up and read.
Mhm. So, one of the things we always ask people is who was your mentor? Who got you situated to figure out, okay, yeah, here's your rough edges, but here's how you can be better, and this is why you want to stay.
Um, I'm lucky to have had many mentors in my life, and I'll just rattle off. Uh, I think when I was at FIU, my advisor Alfred Soto, he's a professor at FIU and was an advisor for the student newspaper, and he definitely helped me to hone my writing a lot better. And he's very open with his criticism. Will sometimes send me an email like, "You wrote this and I didn't like it. Here's some edits." Um, Robert Giras is also the advisor for student media, and he's excellent. When I got into my professional life, Chuck Strauss at Miami New Times, he's the editor in chief, former editor in chief who hired me. And he saw I was actually feeling pretty down on myself at the time. I was getting close to graduating college, and I wasn't sure if journalism was for me because I hadn't received any internships or anything. And then he called me up and said, "Hey, I read your clips from Panther Now, and I want you to work for us." And so that was I
That's
give all
nice.
the credit to him for that. And um, Jessica Lipscomb was my editor at New Times directly, and she helped out like the way that I see working in journalism, and just first of all creating a work life balance. That was a huge lesson that as a young journalist I'm glad she gave me. And also just learning how to do local stuff and make it important make people realize how important it is to them.
Yeah.
So definitely those people.
Oh, I'm harping always on the local elections and all the stuff like that. And for those who don't know, South Florida is a huge. Broward County alone has over 2 million people in it, let alone Miami-Dade, which is slightly bigger than us, just
Hmm.
south of us. So, I mean, we'd be the 35th largest state if Broward County was a state by itself. I mean, we've got a tremendous mass of people down here, so it's really hard to cover all the things like you do.
Yeah, I mean it's an uphill battle, and we can never get to everything. And I think that's one of my biggest regrets in this job is that you can't get to everything, but you try your best. And I try with each story to give it the attention that it deserves, so that even if I can't get back to it, at least someone has left a signpost here.
Yeah.
And like you said, I mean, the city of Miami alone, which I do a lot of my coverage on, is nearly 500,000 people. I think maybe if they did a census today, it might be 500,000 people. And in local elections, only a small fraction of the voting population ever makes it out to those. People are elected by razor thin margins of like 2,000, 3,000 votes in a city of 500,000. So that's the wall that we as like
Yeah.
local journalists are really coming against, is getting people to understand that the most important news might not be coming out of Washington. It might be coming from down the street from you at City Hall.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why we try to get people like you on here to hear about that side of all this reporting and all these things. Have you had any, not naming names, but just what is it like to have to try and report on someone who's in power and they don't like what you're doing, what you're saying, what the story is? What's that like to try and be a report? Because you're not doing sport.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not doing sports, although all respect to the sports writers, they do
Oh,
great
yeah.
work. But I mean that's sort of been the common refrain in my life, in my professional life, is reporting on people who don't want to be reported on. And I think the way and you have to develop sort of a thick skin. You have to, understand that it's not against you personally, or even if it is against you personally, it doesn't really affect you. If you call someone and they hang up the phone on you after hearing your voice, or tells you that, calls you names or whatever, you kind of have to, which has happened. It happens. You continue forward and you keep doing what you're doing, and you can't let that affect you. But you can certainly quote them in what they're saying. I love doing that. When someone, I call a politician, I won't name names. They say like, "Oh, you're just trash, and I'm not going to talk to you," and then they laugh it off and they hang up. I'll write that in the story. Um, but the way that I go about doing that is I try my best in all of my reporting to rely heavily on documents, on records that I can point to, so that I'm not just doing a he said, she said, because that doesn't really help anyone. But if I have a document that is backing up what I'm reporting on, then no matter what this person says, I can say, well, here it is in black and white. So if there's a legal case, if there's a court document or a record, and I call that person and they don't talk to me, or they whatever, I still have something to report on because I have black and white letters that I can point to.
How does that work? Because down here in South Florida, again, if you're not familiar with the area, we have a very large Hispanic population.
Hmm.
I think it is a minority majority county now in Miami-Dade, and Broward is approaching that.
Hmm.
Um, how is that trying to struggle with that divide for you, Spanish to English / everybody else?
In terms of what exactly, like in speaking to
Access.
the audience, or
Yeah, speaking to
reporting?
the audience and your access, because you have access to a lot of people because you're bilingual.
Right.
But does that actually translate? How does that translate into when you're trying to do the reporting? Because for the most part, you're doing your reporting in English.
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, like you pointed out, I am bilingual. I do speak Spanish. So that, in terms of getting access, that helps tremendously. Um, Not only like being able to speak to people who are that only speak Spanish, or are monolingual, don't speak English, and just being able to get their stories, but also speaking to people who are bilingual, who might feel more comfortable in Spanish, is sometimes a tactic where someone's guard might be up in English, but you start speaking to them in Spanish and they kind of let down the walls because they're like, "Oh, this is my mother tongue." They feel more comfortable speaking with you. That's great. Um, and I would say when it comes to then reporting that out, it's not an issue. At WLRN, our reporting is in English, but we can have a little Spanish on air.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I can record people, I can interview people in Spanish, record what they're saying, and then play a little bit of that on air, and then I'll just translate it in my voice, or have someone else do like a voiceover, a dub.
Mhm.
But that it's okay, and I enjoy doing that because I think it's the most important thing for WLRN as a local radio station is to reflect the community, and to share like real people, community stories, neighborhood stories. So if I'm putting Spanish on air, I am reflecting the community that I am reporting on. So
Mhm.
I like to do it as often as possible. Um, we don't have Spanish language reporting. Like, I can't report on the air in Spanish. But what we are doing now on the website is, there's an automatic translation tool. So if there's a written article that's in English, you can translate it to Spanish, and I believe Haitian Creole as well. So we're working on ways to improve that. And I definitely want to see some more. I think it's really important.
Yeah, I do. I think that it's one of those things that's the whole point of living here, is to actually embrace other cultures and all the stuff. And because of that being the gateway to the Americas and all those things down here that we just take for granted sometimes, I'm just like, well, yeah, of course. I'm going down here with my Spanish wife to an Italian restaurant, and then we're going to go over here and get Haitian. Yeah, we're going to go to a Creole. Okay, stop. This is not a food show today. So one of the questions we always ask people is, what was your biggest failure? Because you've got lots of good stuff that you've succeeded in. You've made a good name for yourself down here. What is it that you failed at? What did you learn from it?
That's I hate getting that question, and I love getting that question. It's like a job interview. I would say I I I have failed sometimes in I think wanting to get the more edgy or salacious story out there, especially as a young reporter, and not always crossing my T's and dotting my I's, and making sure that A, like I've got this backed up, I've got everything backed up, and B, that I'm being sensitive to the people that I'm talking about, and their feelings, and knowing, all right, how much actually needs to be said to get the story out there and how much is just extra on top that's not needed. So I won't get into specific examples, but there have been times where, looking back, I wish I had exercised a little bit more restraint and thoughtfulness, and I've tried to do that as I've grown up in this job. It is being a lot more thoughtful about what I'm saying and why I'm saying it.
That's awesome. I like that. I like that. So we are a technology show. So one of the questions I need you to tell me is, you casually mentioned it, like, and we carry all this tech and I have to juggle these things. What is all the stuff that you juggle and that you have to carry around to cover a story nowadays?
If you give me 1 second, I can grab it.
Sure. Go grab. Yeah. Yeah. This is going to be interesting. Okay, let's go. Let me pull up his story for you here. Oh, there he is. See how fast he is, man. Told you he's a professional, folks.
I appreciate that. So this is my bag, my equipment bag. So I always laugh sometimes when I have to go places, because I'm carrying my backpack with my laptop, my equipment bag with all of the sound equipment, and my lunch bag, and I just look like, I don't know what I look like, a fool. But so we use this is my recorder. I carry this with me all the time. It's a Zoom H4n Pro handy recorder. And this is the bread and butter. This is how I'm recording people in interviews. This is how I'm recording what we call natural sound, which is just like the ambient sound of an area or of a room. And it all goes through here. So there's a built-in microphones that we can use, and then we can also plug in a microphone. I've got this old guy right here, and that we can plug in as well. That's a little bit better for one-on-one interviews. And what else? I think I left this. There's a windscreen in the car that some people call it a dead cat. I call it a troll head because it looks like this little troll doll hair, and that helps me out a lot. So that's the main equipment, and then we use Adobe Audition software to edit our audio. So when I first started, I felt like it was a lot of cables, a lot of things I had to carry, but now it's fairly straightforward. I think I had some help from our former school education reporter, Kate Payne, who taught me how to plug in wire, like XLR cables from my recorder into any government proceeding. Usually has a box that you can plug into, and that's how you're getting the audio. So from the technology side, that's what we do.
Nice. So what's your dream technology then? What would you love to have to be able to pull this off better?
I'd love to be able to upload my audio from the recorder directly to the computer, to the web, either to my Google Drive or something, because right now it's sort of a clunky process where I record the audio, then I have to eject the SD card, put it into an adapter, and then plug that adapter into my computer to then upload the audio, which is first world problems, very simple, but especially when I'm recording something and then I upload it to the computer to listen to it to see if there's any issues, and I hear an issue with the audio and I have to re-record it, it's just, I'm going back and forth. So ideally, I would love to see a recorder that could upload directly, like some digital cameras can upload their photos directly to the cloud. I'd love to get my audio uploaded directly to the cloud.
That'd be, I just thought that happened already. When you said SD card, and I'm like, yeah, okay, wow. Huh.
Maybe I'm behind. To be honest,
no, I mean,
I'm a Luddite, so
you're really the professional, not I. Although we do have that available in Adobe Creative Cloud at our creation stations, so anybody could go use that software to go do that.
Yes, play around with it. I feel like a DJ whenever I'm cutting audio, so it's really cool.
That is a very cool thing. So tell me about when somebody's coming to you, say, hey, I want to be a journalist. I know the first instinct tends to be like, no, don't, no, you're never going to be able to make a living doing this. But in all seriousness, what do you tell someone who's coming up to you and saying, hey, how do I get into this field? And or how can you do this without being in the field? If you just like, I want to report about my local city government, but I don't want to do it for a living.
Mhm.
Are there
So
options?
I would say to your joke at the beginning, I heard that a lot when I was in college. Like, don't get into journalism. There's no jobs left, and thank God and knock on wood, I'm still employed. Yes, the field is shrinking, and there's a lot less money than there going around than there was 20, 30 years ago. But I think it's still a noble profession, and it's needed. It's
Yeah.
absolutely needed for our democracy and just to live in the modern world. So when someone tells me that, um, my first encouragement is always to like get clips. That's the main thing. Clips, it's kind of an anachronism, but just your stories published. Like you want to get things published as much as possible, because at the end of the day, that's how I got every job that I've gotten. Because I'm not a journalism major, not a communications major. My studies were primarily on literature, but I was writing all the time for the school newspaper, and sending that is what got me the job at New Times, and so on and so on. So I encourage young people who approach me like this to either work for their school paper if they're at a university, find their local small publications and start pitching them freelance. I freelanced for a little bit for the Miami Times, which is a historically Black publication covering Black communities in Miami-Dade County, and that was super helpful to me because that was my first outside of university journalism job, and I just freelanced. I did a couple of articles for them, and so that not only improves your skills because you're getting practice, but it's also giving you a portfolio that you can send to a possible employer. And for the last part of your question about doing it on your own, um, I would say that's difficult because I think that with the way the social media is nowadays, a lot of people are now styling themselves as citizen journalists, and they're posting things online that people, and they often get sometimes more followers than a traditional news organization, and they're getting a lot of the stuff. And I think that's good for wanting to get this information out there. But the issue is the misinformation that can sprout from that, because when you're not part of a news organization, there is no one that's fact checking. There's not an editor who is asking like, how do you know this exactly? Are you sure about the wording of this? And the biggest thing that separates professional journalists from citizen journalists, um, or the I don't want to make generalizations because I'm sure there's some very ethical citizen journalists, but is sort of a code of conduct and a code of ethics that we have to abide by. Not burning sources that are off the record, understanding what off the record and on the record is, making sure that you're fact checking everything, making sure that you're being fair. So, and I've seen a lot of misinformation from a lot of popular pages in Broward and Dade County. So if someone wanted to do that, I would say definitely, make your own blog, make your own page, but do your best to make sure that you're working ethically and carefully, and that you can back up and prove everything that you're saying, because you don't want to misinform the public and create issues and a panic when there doesn't need to be. If you misread a police report and you think that there's a mass shooting going on, um, and you put that out there, but it turns out it was a firecracker that went off. Now you've scared everybody, and because you didn't go and fact check and call the authorities. So I would just caution people to be careful.
It's good advice for everything, not just
Yeah,
journalism. Great advice for just reading the news, folks.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so let's take you back all the way back to when you were a little kid. What was the creative stuff that you were doing before you were a journalist, literature
Mm.
person? Were you digging in the dirt? Were you painting, dancing? What were you doing?
I was a writer since I was a kid. It's funny because I didn't only in the last couple of years did I realize like, oh, I've always been a writer. I thought it's like, oh, it's just something that I picked up in college, but I went back and I found my yearbook from the fourth grade. Um, yeah, thankfully, my mom still had that. So I looked at my yearbook from the 4th grade, and I saw that they published like a poem that I had written and submitted to a contest at school.
Nice.
And so reading that, it was bad, but I was a little kid,
It's
but
kids.
I was like, oh, I've always done this, my whole life, and I've always come naturally to it. So as a kid, I was you're writing in journals, like writing stories and poems, and I played with Legos, but I was never very good with them. But I think I was just like an imaginative
I don't
kid
think you need
running
to be
around
good at
playing with my
Legos. I
brothers.
think it's just playing.
Yeah, yeah. I just couldn't build anything. I didn't know how to. I'm not good with my hands.
Yeah. Yeah, we got a
But
project going on for the summer around the library system where you just have to build a letter with Legos, and we're getting some interesting results. It's fun.
I would love to see that. I
Yeah.
think I'm learning to be more forgiving and understanding, art is art, regardless of the quality necessarily. But I would say that, in middle school, I did pick up the guitar for a little bit. It took a couple years of guitar, and I've tried to go back to that multiple times over the years and haven't stuck to it, but I'd like to. So I would say those are sort of my creative outlets.
That's cool. That's very cool. Okay, so we have made it 35 minutes in without using the A word. We're going to go a little bit longer without, but I want to first ask, what do you think society thinks about what you're doing and how you do it for this job? As you said, journalism is kind of a dying art, or it's not a well-funded art anymore,
Mm-hmm.
at least.
Mm-hmm.
I personally don't think it's dying. I think it's being choked, but that's a different issue.
Yeah.
What do you think society gets wrong about what you do versus the results / the output that you guys have been doing for the public?
Well, firstly, to your point that it's not well funded, I would encourage your listeners to subscribe or become members to your news outlet of choice. I won't even say you necessarily have to
If you're
become a
down here in
subscriber
South Florida, do LRN. Yeah, it's okay.
to
You can say that.
WLRN, WLRN.org if you so choose. You could even get one of these shirts during one of
Oh,
the
the
drives.
Cafecito. Nice.
Yes. But honestly, subscribe to your local newspapers,
Yeah,
local blogs, whatever, because that is so important to keep it
I
alive right
subscribe.
now.
I've
Is the
got 3
membership?
different people on Patreon and Substack that I subscribe
Yeah,
to just to throw them a couple dollars to say, hey, you're doing good work.
I'm a big fan of that Patreon, Kickstarter, things like that. I try and support as much as I can. I support my former employer at Miami New Times because they have now a subscription service. Because if we want to keep this going, we need to fund it, and that's how we do it, through member funding. But to answer the rest of your question about what people get wrong, I think so. I'll tell you what I hear a lot from like family members or from people that I talk to, where I'm like, when I tell them, "Oh, I'm a reporter, I'm a journalist," for some reason the question I get a lot is, "Oh, so do they just like tell you what you're supposed to write?" Is like someone, as if someone, some voice from above is like puppeteering me and saying like, "You have to write about this today." And I think that's the perception that partly with this whole fake news thing, where people assume that there's political talking points from whatever side that are getting fed to us directly, and like this is what we're going to write, but that's not true. I mean, particularly at the local level, local journalists, we're watching the news every day. We're in the communities, we're going to meetings, we are speaking to people who live here, and my inbox is full of people asking me to tell stories. People are calling me all the time, texting me, and I'm reporting on things that are happening right now here where we live. No one is telling me what to write. I pitch stories, and my editors will tell me, "I think that's good. I think that should change a little bit, whatever." But this is all like we're doing this ourselves. We are news gathering, and I think that's what people get wrong. I also think people. I mean, to our point earlier about local news, I think people tend to pay a lot more attention to the national stuff, to the TV stations, to CNN, Fox, whatever, and they don't really, they aren't subscribed to their local newspaper. They're not watching local news. So my dad, watches the TV news, and he said, "Why is nobody talking about this thing about Biscayne Bay?" For instance,
Yeah.
he said that, and I was like, "Dad, people have been reporting on Biscayne Bay for years, all the time. Just read the Miami Herald." And he's like, "Oh, I guess I haven't looked." So
And if
I
you
think that's
feel like you're
part of it.
afford, and you don't feel like you can do the support through a direct subscription, use your library. We have them.
Mhm.
We pay for it for you. Come to the library and read the site, and go to the library website to read Miami Herald, Sun Sentinel. Your local library has your local papers.
100%. I'm a big fan of the local libraries. I go to the library every week. I work from there when I'm working from home. I rent books, I scan, I print. It's a great resource.
Yeah, we do a lot of stuff. So, in our last minute here, last couple of minutes before we leave, the A word. So, artificial intelligence has been,
Mm.
it's not going to replace us. I know this. I talk about this on my tech show every Thursday all the time. The good, the bad, the ugly of what AI and algorithms are doing for us. How are you guys in the newsroom dealing with the supposition from people that, oh, well, yeah, this is going to replace you? Just like back from 2000 or from the 90s, people are like, oh, no, Google's going to replace all the libraries. It's like, yeah, no, we're still here, guys. We do a much better job. Yeah, and the AI needs to learn from Josh. You need the
Right.
reporting from real people. So,
Right.
what's those conversations like right now?
Well, it's funny. I like to tell the story that I had a professor at Miami-Dade College down here while I was doing dual enrollment classes, who told us, "Oh, you guys need to learn, like, all of you get into computer programming and computer engineering, because that's going to be the future, and you're going to be replaced." And this was in, like, I would say 2015 or 2016. And then when this AI stuff started getting popular and ChatGPT started getting popular, computer programmers were losing jobs to because these places, these companies could use ChatGPT to program. So I always thought that was interesting. There's no one's really safe, but in that way, everyone is safe, because there's going to be new ways to do things. Um, so the conversations in the newsroom, I think the main thing that we're trying to get across is that AI should be used as a tool, and not a replacement. So there are ways that we can use AI as a tool. So we have transcription software, for instance, where I can upload 30 minutes, an hour of audio that I've recorded of a meeting, and plug that into a software, and it will generate a transcript that's, like, pretty decent. And now I can go through that transcript and pick out quotes and things like that. So that's really helpful as a tool. There are other tools available to journalists that using AI to scrape a website, a government website, and find the exact documents that you need, things like that. But for me personally, and I think a lot of us share this opinion, that we should not be using AI to replace work that people are doing, only to, like, make that work easier. And in general, I would say, this is not the opinion of WLRN, but the opinion of Joshua Ceballos, is that generative AI is very problematic, and I try to avoid it as much as possible for various reasons. Partly because of the copyright issues. It's trolling the internet and getting images created by real, genuine human artists who have to pay for a living, and they get their money off of their art. The AI is just taking their style and then recreating that for free. And I think that's highly, highly problematic. I'm like you said, Patreon. So I'm a patron of the arts, and I think that's really messed up.
Okay.
And also the environmental impact of the heat that's generated from these computer centers, these server centers where they are running this AI. There's some recent reporting on how much heat that's being created around them, how much energy that's spent. So generative AI in general, I try to avoid it. I'm not a ChatGPT guy. I don't use any of these image generators. I avoid it. But I think looking into the future in a lot of industries, including journalism, we have to think of ways to use AI as a tool to make our jobs easier, but not take over them.
Yeah. There's a conversation going in one of the small publishers that I interact with a lot on. They have a no AI policy. And it's like, well, does that mean I can't use Adobe because Adobe is using AI? And how can I edit my photos if I can't use? Yeah, it's a complicated issue. It's not a clear cut. It is all evil or it's all good. It's one of those layered conversations that people really need to start having.
And I think, and I say this, I'm convicting myself here, because, like I said, I'm a Luddite, so I hate this stuff. And so I tried to kind of dig my head in the sand when it comes to AI, but you can't do that. You have to educate yourself and you have to learn the terms, like being able to know the difference between generative AI versus, machine learning programs and large language models. Knowing that allows you to be more concise with like what you're talking about, where you can have maybe a no generative AI policy
Yeah.
where we're not training the AI on anybody's voice and recreating someone's voice on the air with a robot,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
a
You and
concern
I
that we
both have
have in the
that whole
radio
thing
sphere.
of, when somebody wants to do a deep fake audio on us. Yeah.
Deep fakes, awful. So you can have a no generative AI policy, but be able to use some of these like machine learning programs. So equipping yourself with knowledge, big library thing.
Thank you.
Learn the terms
Yeah.
and be able
Yeah.
to discern the difference.
That's an awesome one. I think we're going to end it right there. I'm going to skip the last one here because that is a great ending for us right there. Thank you so much, Josh, for being here. Links to your Blue Sky and to your LinkedIn and WLRN profiles are in the chat for everybody to follow up on. Reach out if you're in South Florida and you have a story idea. Reach out. I know Josh wants to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can't do it, then I will forward it to our team. And our Broward County reporter, Carlton Gillespie, does great work. So if you're in Broward and have stuff,
I would have
you
had
can reach out to
Carlton
me or
on.
to him.
We're supposed to have two strangers, so I
Okay.
can't put you and Carlton on at the same time.
We'll just talk crap.
Yeah, there we go.
We'll just garbage talk all the time.
Again, thank you, Josh. If there's any stories that you need to follow up on, you can reach out to us, creationstation@broward.org, and we'll pass them along. We'll see everybody on Thursday for Tech Talk Weekly.
Thanks very much.